Well, after a lot of running around the past few days and right before the show started, folks, but with that, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome into the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion Los Angeles Sparks here on WNBA 365 for Saturday night, August 30th, 2014. Cal McClure joining you folks here from Studio 171 in San Diego. And again, folks, as we continue to struggle here with these technical faults and difficulties, joining us again, folks, via Apple's FaceTime on my computer desk is Chris Woodmansey at the Adenhart Studios up in Anaheim, California. Chris, I don't know, man. It's been a pretty rough few days for myself and my family. We'll get to that in a second, dude. But other than that, this is like really bad that this has been going on, dude, since I don't know how long it's been going on, man. But other than that, how's it been going up there tonight?
Not hanging here, just I'm stressing out by next month, just looking for a job. Hey, fast.
Now, again, folks, if any of you guys out there are avid Twitter followers or Facebook friends of mine, folks, and you kind of wonder why we've been off the air the past few days, folks, I've been caught up in a bit of a family emergency here, folks. If you saw the tweets or the Facebook post, my grandfather has been transferred from ICU here in San Diego to just a regular hospital here. He suffered a pretty gnarly stroke a few days ago. He has apparently he's looked a lot better when I saw him the past few days, but it looks like things are not really on the upside right now. So we're kind of hoping and praying for that. And Chris, like I told you, man, we had a loaded Q&A bar, Chris, before the show started. We do have a question here from an avid viewer who is asking, by the way, how is your grandfather doing? I do send thoughts and prayers to your family. Chris, what I heard from today from my mom, she went and visited him today. He looks a lot better, Chris, than he did on Thursday when I got word of his stroke and him being rushed to the emergency room down here in San Diego. Chris, it appears he's probably has lost his ability to speak loud and clear. He could be paralyzed on his whole right side, so things aren't looking too good, man. But he's going to hang around here for a bit, and I know he's going to come back stronger than this dude. But Chris, I mean, I know that we're here to talk about the playoffs and the Sparks head coaching search, dude, but like I told you, Chris, back in May when we had the big fires here, dude, for the past few days, life has had to be a bit bigger than sports. So appreciate everyone's kind words. But again, Chris, when you have to deal with stuff like this, man, not only is it weigh heavy on you, your friends and family also weigh heavy. I know that you and everyone else out there, said some nice words about my family. But Chris, I mean, this is an instance, man, where life has to be heavier than sports. So we're going to persevere here, but again, thank you for the question, though. Again, my grandfather is doing a lot better than he has over the past. Now, again, Chris, we have a loaded question and answer bar tonight, folks. Again, if you guys want to get involved here, black box right here, my finger's at. Click on that, and we will send you over to the live Q&A lobby. Now, Chris, I know, man, we missed the past few days because of my emergency and a few things going on here in my house as far as it goes with my family is concerned. So you'll get, Chris, to the first Game 1 that occurred last night between the number 2 seed Minnesota Lynx and the number 1 seed Phoenix Mercury. And, Chris, the the garbage trucking victories continue here for the Merc. They beat the Lynx last night 85-71, and they pretty much, Chris, a dominating Game 1 victory. And, Chris, with that victory, the Mercury have pushed the defending WNBA champs to the utter brink of elimination. Now, Chris, we know that this was going to be a classic series like we have talked about for the past few days or so about the Mercury and Lynx being a very good matchup. But, Chris, I don't think I would have thought, though, that the Mercury would do this and just completely drub the Lynx, though. Chris, in your mind, though, did you expect any Game 1 to go that bad for the Lynx in Game 1 at all? Or what do you think went wrong, though, for them in that first game?
I don't know what wrong because I didn't watch the game or anything, so I don't know what happened.
Chris, I think this was like a wake-up call, perhaps, Chris. And there's another great question here, Chris, in our Q&A bar. And before we get to that question, we'll get to the Game 1 from tonight in the WNBA, which saw the Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever hook up tonight in the Fever. Chris, held on by the skin of their teeth to win tonight 77-70 at Bankers Life Fieldhouse tonight in Indianapolis. Chris, this was a game that went seesaw all the way until about the last part of the fourth quarter tonight. So, Chris, with that happening, Chris, we have a question here in our Q&A bar, as I can get over back here to our viewing page. And, Chris, the question here that we're answering reads, after watching the game ones, Chris, who do you feel is feeling the most pressure, the Lynx or the Sky, after those two teams dropped game one? Chris, who do you think is feeling the most pressure right now after losing game one, the Lynx or the Sky? Who do you think?
I think Minnesota, the Lynx.
We need a better answer than that, dude. I need you to get. We need a good answer here, man. Not just the team name, dude, but reasons why they're feeling the most pressure right now.
I think because since they're facing the top team in the league, #1 seed, Phoenix Mercury, and they're like on a roll, can't be stopped, and untickle record at home, and just unstoppable.
Chris, I think the Lynx are feeling the most pressure, as you said, but Chris, they're feeling more pressure because Chris, the defending WNBA champions are on the brink of elimination, and I agree though that I agree that they're facing a good team, Chris, but Chris, last season the Lynx swept everybody in the postseason, including this very same Phoenix ball club last year. But the Mercury did a lot of retooling over the offseason to get better. Minnesota didn't really have to move many pieces. Chris, I think they're feeling more pressure because they know that if they lose tomorrow, their chances of being like the 01-02 LA Sparks, Chris, to repeat as champs are going to be going down the drain sometime soon. Chris, I only say Minnesota again, man. I think we only say Minnesota, Chris, because they're the defending champions. Now, Chris, I think the Sky are more so kind of like who cares, basically, because here, Chris, they just knocked out the Eastern Conference champions, and they're facing the #2 team in the conference in the Fever. Now, I'm not counting up the Sky yet, Chris, because this is a team, Chris, that will battle to the final buzzer like we saw in Game 3, where they had the buzzer beater by Elena Del Don to beat the defending Eastern Conference champs. But, Chris, I think more so, Chris, the Sky are playing with house money right now because, Chris, who really expected them, other than Shorty Mamba 24, who really thought, Chris, that the Sky, as a 4 seed, would beat Atlanta to get to the next round right now? So I think, Chris, more so, Chris, all the pressure's on Minnesota. The defending champs, Chris, have the most pressure. Rashad Jackson, Kirby, Chris, all of our friends that are Lynx fans, Chris, they would say there's pressure on this team now to win Game 2 back in Minneapolis. Now, Chris, will they win Game 2 in Minneapolis? Right now, Chris, it's a toss-up because the Mercury have owned them all season, but maybe 1 or 2 games this year. So I think, Chris, the Lynx have more pressure, Chris, because, as we said, man, they're the defending WNBA champs. And, Chris, what are your thoughts about the Chicago Sky? Because, they basically, Chris, weren't picked by a lot of experts or us two or a few people to beat Atlanta in the first round. So, in your view, what's your sort of take on the Sky if they lose Game 2 and get swept out of the Eastern Conference Finals right now?
I think it'll probably be who cares, because they didn't think they were going to like that. And also probably since it's Len Dunn's last year coaching in the WNBA, and I think it'll probably be who cares, since letting her go into the WNBA finals and last year, because they didn't think they could have beat the top team in the East, Atlanta, and they just somehow came back in the fourth quarter and Game 3 and to win.
So again, folks, if you want to chime in here on Twitter or in our live Q&A, hang on here, folks. And the question being is, after watching Game 1, who is feeling the most pressure? Is it Minnesota or Chicago? Give us your take on Twitter at LA Sparks 265, at CalamaC3, at LA Sparks Fan 30 with the hashtag pressure, and we will take your tweets about that. Chris, we'll get to some more questions here real quick. Now, Chris, one other talking point here right now, Chris, as we go to the LA Sparks now, who had their season done for about a week or so, Chris, still trying to figure out what went wrong for this team this year. But, Chris, now comes the point in time that a lot of fans, Chris, are really ready for, man, and that is the off-season coaching search and free agency period where, Chris, while we know the Sparks can make some big splash trade and get a few new bodies in here, but Chris, let's talk specifically about the head coaching search, because that's going to be, Chris, a talking point here on the network for the longest time until next season begins, Chris. Now, Penny Toller, Chris, has stated that she does not want to be the head coach this season or after this year because she's more comfortable being in her GM position. Now, Chris, my little birdie, who, if anyone's wondering, his name is Emmanuel Mendoza, who is the business executive of the LA Sparks front office. Chris, he has told me that the team has a list of 9 international coaches, who I cannot list names because it's confidential information, Chris, but there are 9 international basketball coaches that are currently on the LA Sparks' coaching staff roster, plus 2 current coaches in the WNBA that are on their radar. So, Chris, getting to our first question here. Now, Chris, again, man, I can't disclose the names of the people involved here because this is confidential front office groundwork here, man. But a question here reading, who do you feel is the best candidate for the coaching job? Now, Chris, I'm going to throw a couple names out to you off the top of my lid right now, and I want to get your take on each of them, Chris. Now, again, Chris, remember there's 9 different international coaches that are on the front office list that, again, folks, I cannot give you, folks, because, again, that is confidential LA Sparks information. Now, Chris, a couple names that have already come up here in my head by fans of the Sparks and other people included, Chris. The first obvious choice, Chris, would be Michael Cooper, who, again, Chris, had led the Atlanta Dream to the number 1 seed, Chris, but, again, a flop in the first round of the postseason this year to the Chicago Sky, Chris. Now, a lot of people, Chris, in LA have said that they would love to see Michael Cooper back, Chris, because of his connection, of course, with Sparks owner Magic Johnson. Chris, I think he's probably a likely candidate, yes, because of his relationship with Magic. But, Chris, the only problem here, though, is if this happens, this will be Michael Cooper's 3rd different stint coaching this LA club, Chris. Of course, he coached them when they won the titles in 01-02, came back to coach during Candace Parker's rookie year, and then left the course to go get a job with the Denver Nuggets in their NBA D-League affiliate. So, Chris, Michael Cooper is on the list, because he's a former Showtime Laker, and he knows Magic very, very well from those 5 titles won in that day. But, Chris, do you think, though, that bringing Coop back for the 3rd different time is going to help this team anytime soon?
I think so, probably would. Then he knows his team. He's relationships with Magic Johnson. He coached Candace Parker in her rookie year, and I think it'll help.
Chris, I mean, Chris, who would not love to see Magic and Coop, back together? I mean, I'm sure, Chris, it was tough for Michael Cooper to come back to Staples for the first time last year with Atlanta as a visiting team's coach, and see Coop and Coach Miller after the game. Which, Chris, leads me to my next candidate, which would be Coach Dave Miller from Terminal Cable Sports. And now, Chris, Coach Dave Miller's resume, Chris, speaks volumes, Chris. 25 years of coaching the NBA level, so much great work on Sportsnet as an analyst, and, of course, his great basketball clinics, Chris. Chris, I would love to see him get a shot at least, Chris, be in consideration, because his knowledge of the game, Chris, is off the chart, I think. As far as it goes, Chris, with him on Sportsnet, great analysis every night he brings about not just the Sparks but the Lakers, Chris. And I think, Chris, he's worthy of at least, a dry run, maybe until the All-Star break. Because I think with his experience, man, that 25-year experience on the NBA level, Chris, and plus he really, really loves the women's game, Chris, and he really talks it very well as well, Chris. So, your thoughts about Coach Dave Miller possibly being in the running sometime soon?
It's probably be great, since he's a great analyst and loves the Sparks, women's basketball, and it'd be great coaching the Sparks.
Chris, I think it would be beneficial if it was Coop or Miller. But, Chris, there's 2 more candidates, Chris, I can think of here off the top of my head real quick, and we'll get to one real quick, which would be Dawn Staley, Chris, who's a WNBA and women's basketball icon. She's done so much great work across the WNBA in her playing career. And, of course, Chris, the other one that we brought up a bit is Lisa Leslie. Now, Lisa, I think, Chris, is in a different boat from everybody else, Chris. I think her and Penny can go on It's a Small World together at Disneyland, because they're both in the same boat, Chris, where they are both former players of the Sparks in a fashion where Penny played for 3 years and Lisa played her entire WNBA career, Chris, with LA. But, Chris, I think the problem here, though, is that Lisa has sort of detached away from basketball operations. Now, we know that Magic and her were supposed to meet during the offseason for her gig and role for the 2014 season, which Magic did not give her a title for the year, so she basically was a fan all season. But, Chris, do you think, though, that Lisa would be a fit, though, as head coach of the Sparks? I think she would be, Chris, but I just don't know if her schedule will allow it, Chris, because she's so busy now with her kids, and she's been over watching the U.S. Open for tennis over in New York. I mean, I don't know, Chris. It would be nice to have Lisa as the head coach, though. But what's your thought, though, about Lisa possibly being in the running sometime soon?
Probably, I think so, but maybe not head coach, maybe assistant coach, maybe, perhaps.
Chris, I could see Lisa as an assistant coach, maybe a special consultant to the team, perhaps, where they were maybe even a scout. I think that'd be the best way to go, Chris. You can travel around to women's basketball games across college and across high school, and give out a few names there. But we will throw this out to you folks as well on Twitter. Let us know who do you think is who do you feel is the best candidate for the LA Sparks coaching job. Let us know on Twitter with the hashtag Sparks head coach candidate. Now, Chris, another question here real quick we got 2 more to get to here real quickly. Chris, someone else is asking what player adjustments should be and need to be made by the Sparks for 2015. Chris, I personally think right now that there's a few things. Right now it's interior defense, and Chris, above all, it's guard. It's your guard position, and it's your three-point shooting, I think. Now, I think as far as it goes, Chris, between the big three of Parker, Eno, and Lav, I think we're good there. But, Chris, I think where the Sparks, Chris, got annihilated and killed all year was the guard position between LH10 having a bad season, Elena Beard coming and going during the season, Candace Wiggins' injury during the season. I think, Chris, the only consistent playing guard all year was Arminty Harrington all season with her great defense and her hustle play. Chris, right now, what adjustments have to be made what adjustments should be and need to be addressed by the Sparks during the offseason? And I think, Chris, it's more so their guards and maybe their three-point shooting right now. But what are your pet peeves right now for this LA ball club?
I think the same thing like you said. Guards and some great three-point shooters.
Chris, I've heard a couple of rumblings of players that I think may or may not fit with LA. Someone's already said try to get Maya Moore here. That's not going to happen anytime soon, folks. But Chris, someone did bring up though this name here of Matej Ajivan from the Atlanta Dream, Chris, who can really run the ball well. She's a big body that would play good inside. Chris, I think though that if the Sparks want to get something, they will have to make a trade some way for a big superstar like a Maya Moore, a Skylar Diggins, even a Taurasi, but I don't see any of those moves happening. But, Chris, I think if the Sparks make any moves, it may have to come at a price, Chris, which will either have to be a trade of either NECA, Lav, or even both of them, because I know, Chris, you're not going to get a whole lot for 2 rookies. You'll probably get a large pizza, flash drive batteries, and a 6-pack of root beer probably for Abdi and Green. But I think more so right now, Chris, it's guard play, which was really, really unpredictable all season. Some injuries as well, Chris. And then I think as well, three-point shooting, Chris, has to be addressed as well. And we'll go from there. But again, I think, Chris, is more so just three-point shooting. And probably, Chris, get some better guards in here next season. What do you think?
Yep, I agree.
All right, Chris, we got one more question to get to here real quick, and I think this is going to be a good one to kind of go back and forth on here. Viewer asked, Chris, Magic is giving Candace Parker the control to name the coach and who stays on the team for 2015. Is that, in your mind, a sense of selfishness that Magic is letting Candace Parker make up the roster and the coach for next season? Chris, I don't think this is a case of Magic giving Candace Parker the right to be selfish at all, Chris. This is like Magic said, Chris, in an article a few weeks ago, man. He is right now, Chris, filling the shoes of the late, great Dr. Jerry Buss, Chris, how Dr. Buss came to Magic, Chris, and asked him flat out, you tell me what coach you want, who you want, and I'll make this thing happen, Chris. And Chris, I don't think this is about giving Parker the right to be selfish about naming who it is, Chris. But this is what you do though to be successful in pro sports, Chris. Is you talk to your players, you have that owner and player relationship, and you say, hey, tell me what you want, and I will do my absolute best to fulfill your obligations, Chris. And Chris, right now, Magic has pretty much promised Candace Parker there's going to be a new, a top-flight head coach, a new team president, and Chris, he's basically saying, tell me who you want on the roster, and I will make the moves, Chris. So what do you think, though, Chris? But at the same time, though, Chris, you kind of have to see the other side of the story here, though, Chris. But is Magic, though, giving Parker sort of the right to be a bit selfish here, though, about naming the head coach and who basically, Chris, who stays and go on the roster next season?
No, just him doing like the late Jerry Buss.
Yeah, Chris, I don't think this is really a case of Parker being selfish. I mean, I don't quite know about that one. I mean, Chris, I can kind of see what they're saying, though. Like, okay, you're giving one player, full control here to name her coach and basically, Chris, you're staying, you're traded, you're waived, get out of my city, get out of my arena, out of my locker room, and go play somewhere else, basically, Chris. Chris, I can kind of see that, though, that this is sort of giving this Chris might give Candace that big head, that big ego, perhaps, Chris. But I don't think that this is a case of being selfish, Chris, because I think, like as we stated, though, man, that this was a thing, Chris, that Dr. Buss did during the Showtime era, Chris. He told Magic, he asked for input, basically, okay, who you want to coach? Do you want me to go out and get Kareem? You want me to go out there and get Byron Scott? Basically, Chris, it's not really being selfish that you're giving one player all the right. It's more so asking them, like, okay, what do we need to address? What do we need to do, Chris? Now, again, man, I can see, though, sort of, okay, you're giving full control to one player, man. Isn't that a bit selfish, though, that she can basically say, you're staying, you're going to play with Minnesota, you're going to Tulsa, you're going to Connecticut, get out of my sights, I don't want to see you ever again, basically. But, Chris, though, what do you think, though, looking at that other side, though, of the story, is this, though, sort of an act of selfishness that one player can basically say, Chris, I'm staying, but you're being traded, but Chris, you're being traded to Phoenix. Isn't that sort of a bit of selfishness, though, that you can kind of say a bit?
Kind of, a little bit.
Yeah, I think, Chris, I think it's a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, but we'll see what happens. But again, I don't think, though, that Magic is having Parker be selfish in any means necessary about that. So, folks, if you want to keep hitting up our Q&A bar, folks, and hit that black box right down there and head on over to our live Q&A lobby. Now, Chris, staying with Candace Parker real quick. Candace, Chris, will be featured in the new September issue of People magazine. Her and 4 other athletic moms are out there channeling their inner champion moms. Chris, if it's not one thing with Candace winning awards in the WNBA, Chris, or her being featured in articles in the newspaper or in magazines, she's all out there now. Folks, also real quick, I will bring this up, too, that I also did hear this from Candace straight out here, that, Chris, there is a deal in place right now, man, where we could see LA's original CB3, Chris. We could see Candace Parker at your local movie theater sometime very soon, folks. There is currently a movie project that needs to get some fundraising done here, where Chris, Candace Parker will be featured in a up-and-coming sports action adventure / family movie called Leader of the Pack, where Candace will portray a female basketball player who has one goal, Chris, and that is to be the first woman to play in the NBA. She'll be portraying Maurice Jones. They will need some financial donations from the great public out there to make this dream reality. Now, Chris, I, for one man, Chris, I can name you a laundry list of my favorite sports movies of all time, from The Longest Yard to the Rocky series to Field of Dreams to Miracle, Chris. But now, Chris, that we may have Candace Parker, the face of the WNBA, Chris, in a movie sometime soon, Chris. Is this a stepping stone, Chris, where we will see more athletes in more featured films sometime soon down the road, Chris? But more so, Chris, about female athletes sometime soon, Chris. Now, I know that we just had Ronda Rousey, probably the greatest UFC female fighter of all time, in a movie in the Expendables 4 with Sylvester Stallone and those guys. But, Chris, is this a stepping stone a bit that we may see more WNBA basketball players in featured Hollywood films sometime very soon?
I think so.
Now, Chris, if you had to, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Chris, but what is your all-time favorite sports movie?
Like what?
I don't know. You can think of like The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler. You can think of the Rocky series, Miracle with Kurt Russell, Field of Dreams. I know I got one right down your alley. Some movie called Angels in the Outfield. I don't know, Chris. What is it?
I want to say, what can I name two?
You can name as many as you want.
Well, I'll say Angels in the Outfield, but I don't know. Remember the Titans count?
Yeah, that counts.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a good list. So with that, folks, and knowing that Candace Parker will be in the field, that Candace Parker will be in a movie sometime very soon. Let us know, folks. What is your favorite all-time sports movie? Let us know on Twitter at LASparks365 with the hashtag favorite sports movie. Now, Chris, I know there's not a whole lot going on here, man. I know that we're still having monumental problems here with our Hangouts, folks. We're trying our best, folks, to get these resolved sometime soon. If not, what will happen here, folks, very soon if you folks remember a bit, I know that Chris was a part of it, but if you remember my old sports show, the Sports Lounge on the Calimac 94 YouTube channel, folks, how we also had problems, folks, with our Hangout on my desktop computer. We had to stop doing the live show, and basically, folks, all we did was just basically pre-record the show, and then right after we ended the video upload, it was already uploaded, and you folks could watch it now, folks. If these problems continue, or we can't get Chris in Hangouts, or maybe if our audio is a bit scratchy still, folks, we may have to go to pre-recorded beforehand, folks. We're trying best here, folks, to still be going live on the air now, folks. This will probably not affect our open court show, which we're going to have fans from across the league here, folks. But, Chris, I don't know what to make of this, man. This has happened, I think, since Game 1 of LA Phoenix, Chris, and I don't know what is the deal. We got to get these things fixed, Chris, but at the same time, man, it's sort of like, it's kind of like who cares at the same time because, we're doing one show a night right now because not a whole lot to go on here, Chris, but Chris, I don't know. It's like what's the big deal that this thing's been going on for like the past 2 weeks already?
I just want to say, I don't know if it's just hunting me back. I don't know if it's that.
I don't know what it is, but we've been live here, folks. So, again, folks, don't worry. We're doing our absolute best here right now to sort of fix these problems we've been having over the past few weeks. But, again, folks, do not sweat it. I'm sure there's just a minor problem going on. So, if we do have some guests on, again, and my audio sounds like a robot, folks, I'm going to have to say it, but just deal with it because we don't know what to fix right now with these lingering problems. Now, Chris, we're running out of show here because we're running out of daylight in time right now for the show time right now. But, Chris, we'll get to a point we brought up earlier in the show real quick again, Chris. Knowing that Minnesota and Chicago lost Game 1, they played their Game 2s with their backs to the wall, Chris. So, again, man, I'll ask you again, but who do you think, though, Chris, is feeling the most pressure right now going into the respective Game 2s?
I think the Minnesota Lynx, since they're the defending champions, and since last season they went unbeatable in the playoffs, and I think they're very much pressured.
Yeah, Chris, I think the Lynx are feeling the most pressure again, as we said earlier in the show, folks. Again, the only reason why we're saying the Lynx, folks, again, is they are the defending WNBA champs, and they did not lose a single game in the postseason last year up until they lost Game 3 or Game 1 against the Mercury last night. Chris, like I said though, Chris, at the same time though, man, this has not been the same Minnesota Lynx team that we've seen over the past over last season or in 2012 or 2011, Chris, because it just seems like, Chris, that they didn't have that firepower, that oomph in their step this year because of so many injuries. And again, Chris, your thoughts about the Chicago Sky as to why they're not feeling so much pressure in Game 2.
Because since they just came off beating the top team in the East, the Atlanta Dream, which no one thought the Chicago Sky was going to win. And so they're probably just like who cares? since no one thought they were going to win, and since it's Lynn Dunn's final career coaching in the WNBA.
By the way, folks, we finally reached a verdict for Chris's punishment for his flop prediction of the Sparks winning the WNBA title, folks. Chris will be getting a negative 30-point back start on our first edition, folks, of Open Court. Remember, folks, Open Court is going to be designed and formatted like ESPN's Around the Horn, so there's going to be points, loss of points and mute. So, Chris, you're going to be starting 30 points behind the pack our first Open Court show because of your flop prediction. What do you got to say for yourself about that?
I don't know. Just, I don't know. No comment.
So Chris will probably be the first participant eliminated from Open Court, perhaps, on our first show when it comes here, again, during the offseason. Now, again, folks, if you guys want to get involved with Open Court, again, we're opening it up to every WNBA and Sparks fan across the league. So, again, folks, if you guys want to get involved here, you guys can send me a direct message on Twitter if you're following me. If you want to get involved, tweet to me, and I'll give you guys all of the information about Open Courts. And I'm assuming, again, folks, remember that Chris gets a negative 30-point deficit to start our first Open Court show when it comes your way over the offseason. Now, folks, real quickly here, a note for you folks about the FIBA tournament today. Team USA absolutely slaughtered the Finland team, Finland today, in their first game of the FIBA tournament for the guys. Again, folks, the women's tournament will begin in September. The first practice for Team USA will be on September 9th. Chris, as we do head out here for the night, Chris, your final thoughts about Game 1s, and what are your thoughts about Game 2 tomorrow between the Lynx and the Mercury?
Just great games all around in Game 1, and I think tomorrow, Game 2, it's going to be a great game coming down the wire. And just, I don't know who to pick because my flops, I don't know.
So again, folks, remember that Chris gets a negative 30-point deficit to start with on our first Open Court show. My thoughts, folks, on Game 2 tomorrow. Expect another good game, and who knows? And Chris, who knows, man? We might be seeing a new WNBA champion tomorrow if, in fact, the Lynx do lose tomorrow.
Yeah.
So with that, folks, we will sign out of here for the night because we have to, and for one, and two, we are going to try our absolute best to get rid of these audio and video problems, folks. So we'll take care of that off air. But, folks, until tomorrow night, have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thank you for coming. And good night now. This has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We are LA. We are the WNBA. For Chris Wnba, I'm Cal McClure, folks. So long, and see you guys tomorrow after Game 2 between the Lynx and the Mercury. Till then, folks, see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye-bye.